Well, there we are, caught having a quick cup of coffee. Not at all. I sip coffee through. Because no matter whether we're 5 minutes or we're 50 minutes, my mouth gets dry, like everybody else's. Right, okay. Welcome to Mirador. We've been on holiday. We've been doing a lot of work in the background, and you'll see the results of that this coming week. I normally start off with yelling and shouting and screaming, and I'm not going to for the moment. I'm going to yell and shout and scream in a few minutes because there's a lot to be yelled and screamed at. And one leads to another quite often. But for the moment, I just want to say that we have a great team at Mirador. We've had some trauma, and each time Mirador itself picks itself up, dusts itself down, and away it goes. It's not going to be silenced, and that is terribly important at the moment, terribly important, because we are the independent voice. Nobody owns us. We say what we want and what we think and what we feel, and our opinion normally is based on reasonable journalistic endeavour. I sometimes get a bit carried away, but I like to think that what I express is the opinions or the views of a number of experts on consensus on what's going on in our society. Well, there's a lot going on, and it's not very pleasant. Not very pleasant at all. I just wanted to say well done to Tony, to Nick, to Stuart, to our support people, Jane in Hastings, who keeps an eye on things there and is busy with a play. It's Macbeth. If you haven't seen it, go along. It's a modern version of it, and they're always very interesting. Excuse me. By the way, if you're an advertiser, you can have your name there. Every time I take a sip of coffee, you get an advert. It doesn't cost very much. We'll let you know in a day or two how you can get hold of us to do that. Why not? Okay. Now, I just named a few people, but also Fergus Wood, who does our wine commentary. Of course, the terrific man from Grizzlies, Andrew Sloan, who is very calm but very forthright when he comes on. Stuart Dolby, of course, who's a mainstay of this station, and his comments on energy, which are going to get more and more and more vital, because he's been saying the government got it cocked up, and he's been saying that for some months, and now the experts are starting to get behind him and saying yes, they have. The only people that aren't admitting to any mistakes, do they ever, are the politicians. And they strut around trying to justify some of the most awful decisions, and we'll just take a look at that in a minute, because they've made one in Lewis, which is starting to really get up my nose and up the nose of a lot of other people who are half decent. Those are the people that support us, and I'm bound to have missed a few. Stephen Catlin, our mayor, is also a great supporter. He quite justifiably said that he checked with the town clerk, and that if he appears on Mirador and expresses opinions or gets involved in our opinions, it would be a conflict of interest, and I understand that, and that's fine. But Stephen is there. I saw him on Saturday night, was it? Yes, Saturday. There he was, helping the food bank people down in the no, it was outside Waitrose. And they were doing quite well. They were collecting quite well. And Sir Stephen was making sure that his presence there underscored their campaign. And I have to say that thank God he's the mayor. And thank God that he's the independent, and always has been, because the rest of the local and national politicians are in disarray. Absolute disarray. And as for the green issues, I went over. The green issues are a good objective, but if you've got the name green as a politician, is for God's sake, will you please start to turn up at some meetings? Because I spoke to one politician over the weekend who, well, wasn't a politician as much as somebody who is a very close observer, is that they never turn up to any of the meetings. Never mind, we'll get onto that some other day, because our local politicians are really going to be under fire this week, or at least the centre of a huge debate. And they don't see it. They don't see it. They think that their flimflam will get them through again. And that's what politics has become now. Flimflam. The Russians are at the gates. What do? We talk about ice cakes. Ice cakes. Can you believe it? But Kevin West, for whom I have some regard as a gentleman and as a politician, he was defending the move from Southover, the headquarters at Southover, where the building has now gone up for either sale or rent or whatever, to move Lewis District Council to Newhaven. Well, I've got no quarrel with the debate as to whether it should be in Newhaven or in Lewis. What I have got the quarrel is why that building is being abandoned. And he said, well, it's very expensive, etc., etc., etc. That's beside the point. The fact is that ever since we moved, and this was a political move, to Eastbourne and have the centres in Eastbourne, once again, globalisation, that dreadful, dreadful word which is now becoming a swear word. Globalisation made everybody accept the fact that bigger was better, that we could do more if we had a combined council in Eastbourne. Well, it may be good for Beestbourne. I don't know. That's debatable as well. But it's not very, very good for Lewis. And what's happened is we have lost our council. If I can, I'm going to try tomorrow to get Paul Miles on. Paul Miles was born and bred Louisian. Did an awful lot of things, or got involved in an awful lot of things. The Magic Garden, which unfortunately is out of commission at the moment because of the wall falling down, but the Rodin exhibition and a good many other things Paul was involved in, and if you like, was a good Louisian. And he's moved down to the West Country, and I don't blame him. But Paul was very articulate about how power at the centre of Lewis, or at least let's not use the word power, how we were able to determine our own destiny here in Lewis has been eroded over the past 15 or 20 years, to the point where we have no say in our own destiny at the moment. The thing is that the politicians on Lewis District Council are going around crowing about how wonderful they're doing, all the good things they're doing. Well, they presided over a complete disaster, complete crumbling of the way that we are governed locally. And now they're crowing even more, that they're contributing a great deal more to it by moving out of the headquarters. Councillor McCleary, is James McCleary, who is going to be a candidate in the next election for Parliament, has put up a little video saying, well, you see, there's all this space. Why is there all this space? We once had a very thriving council here, and various moves were made because we were running out of space. And now we've got huge space. Why? And not only that, there is something called the Scrutiny Committee, which is supposed to be the local MPs, the local councillors, or the governing party at least, have a committee that scrutinises what the executive is doing. And it seems to me it barely meets. And it's certainly not doing much scrutiny. We're in trouble with the tax people. The whole thing is a mess, a complete utter mess. And where is it resulting in? By them saying, well, you see, we haven't got any people left here. That is outrageous, an outrageous suggestion as to why we should abandon that building. Perhaps there is a good case for it, but that's not one of them. It is because we haven't got any local governance anymore. It's like the banks taking all the services. I mean, the banks are another disaster as far as globalization is concerned. And the credit card companies, just even worse. And why do you think I keep on mentioning globalization? Because it is now discredited. At one stage, when the big guns of the world met at Davos, the World Economic Forum, and that would get people, I mean, in the past, like Henry Kissinger and so on. In fact, presidents and prime ministers go to it. And they were all for globalization. It was going to save the West. It was going to save the world. And now, at long last, that very institution is having to say, perhaps we were wrong. Globalization is fracturing our economy. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And that's part of the reason is globalization. And yet there are still companies operating in Britain, and I name one, and that's American Express, with whom I'm appalled at what's happened to a very good company over 5 years, because they got a new head of new CEO, chief executive, who loves globalization. So now basically American Express is governed from the United States, and they apply those sort of practices, which are appalling. Talk about social conscience. Very few organizations, including our governments, have much of a social conscience now. We're full of people wanting to stuff their pockets with money, and they can, as long as the present economy flourishes. But it's not going to. Here's what the Bank of England is saying is, well, in concert with the European Central Bank, under whom we do not anymore have come under influence because of Brexit, is inflation is going to reach 7.25%. Well, it's at 4.5 now. You already know what that means with various things, right? It looks as if that tax rise, despite all, is going to come. Excuse me. We can't get to see a doctor. The energy prices through the roof. House prices. It looks as if that market bubble is going to burst. And if we keep on with the present economic policies and the price rises in the cost of living, it looks as if that bubble is going to burst. A lot of people who thought they were really getting a great deal during lockdown are going to be very surprised. I don't think they are surprised. I'm sure that they watch. But mortgages are going to rise. Everything is rising. We are paying the price. And part of that is through the energy, is because we have decided as a policy to go green. There's nothing wrong with the policy. It's how you actually apply it. And what we had to do was we had to race. We had to show everybody how green we were. While the rest of the world was saying how green they were and then getting on with polluting everything. I'm not advocating that we pollute things, but we need a more studied plan. We still have huge energy resources in the North Sea that could ease us through this crisis, but we're not using them because we don't believe in tampering with our emission targets. Those emission targets are unrealistic. And alternative energy, as I'm sure that our energy correspondent, and as outspoken as I am, our energy correspondent Stuart Dolby will tell you that wind farms and solar panels and so on are fine if the weather is suitable to them. But when the weather isn't suitable to them, they're costly and they're not providing the energy we need. So what do? We buy it. We buy it abroad. And where do we buy it from? Well, a lot of it emanating in Russia And who are we fighting at the moment? Or who are we likely to fight? Russia. The Americans are beginning to get alarmed at the fact that much of our gas and much of our oil and so on comes from the Russian Federation, and that pipeline comes through Ukraine. One of them does anyway. It's all a big bloody mess, and the fact of the matter is that it's partly, no, it's not, it's almost wholly the responsibility of our leaders, of our government. And yes, domestically, in terms of perhaps confidence, Boris has pulled a few fast ones that are now leaking out. But because it suits our leaders to have somebody to yell at and to blame and not actually accept some of the things that are going wrong in our society, that's why I call it the ice cake syndrome. Oh yeah, let's all get morally outraged at the fact that there were parties in Westminster. Yes, it was wrong, and I'm pissed off at it too. Don't misunderstand. But we've got huge problems at the moment, and I do not see anybody who can come in and take over. Does that mean that we shouldn't change? Well, change can be traumatic. Even at a domestic level, if you change from one house to another, or your business changes from one office to another, it's traumatic. It is difficult. It raises all sorts of problems. Do we really want those sort of problems, apart from the ice cake in Westminster, just at a time when the world is going skew-if? Because to me, all that's going to happen is acerbate. What we need is some leadership to try and right the ship. But until actually, is my good friend Graham Addercott, and I'm not bringing Graham into any political thing, but when we were working together in Eastern Europe and trying hard to bring some sort of semblance of a decent independent media there, is on the occasions we would sit down and he would say, they don't know what they don't know. And that's always difficult in reform, is when the people who don't know that they don't know. And that is our leadership at the moment. They've lived in a bubble. They do live in a bubble. And we can see it locally and we can see it nationally. And it's time for a clear out. But not because of an ice cake, but because those 650, and God only knows how many councillors around the country, and how many parish councillors, and for that matter, I'm sorry, Councillor Catlin, Mr. Mayor, town councillors need sorting out. We need reform. How do we get better people? And we've raced because we didn't want to offend anybody. We've raced to make sure at all levels that what we do is we get ratios. So many women, so many black people, so many homosexuals, so many this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter. Isms should not count in politics. I don't care if we have 650 black homosexuals running the country, as long as they are the best people for it, and that they are running the country because they understand the electorate and not for their own particular policies or designs or ends. And that's the way I see it. And we haven't got that at the moment. We've got a very, very weak bunch. And the weak bunch have come just at a time of crisis. How are we? Where are we? Oh, 19 minutes I've been on with this. Oh, let's take a break and let's look at something nice. I always like to look at things that are nice. This is the one thing that I do know. We've got, because it's always there for me when I start to get really upset. He said, there we go. Here it is. It calms me down. I hope it calms you down. Well, yes, get pissed off early. And if you want to be pissed off at me, I don't mind in the least. It's fine. It is fine, it is fine, it is fine. That's why I'm here, to stick my head above the parapet and say the unthinkable. Because one of the things that really is bothering me is the attempts to curb the freedom of the media. And I still haven't had a chance. I will look at the papers this morning, but then I shall go on the internet to take a look at this legislation that is being proposed by the government to try and stop hate speech on social media. It is absolutely right and proper that they should try to stop hate speech, but they can't help but tamper with the main objective. And when I started to hear some of the things that they're going to do, is the chances are that what they're doing is they're going to try and stop this sort of program. I will be accused of being illegal in saying that this government and this set of politicians are useless. Now that's debate. There's a local politician called Kevin West. I think I've met Kevin, but it doesn't matter whether I have or not. But he posts some sensible stuff from time to time. But then once in a while, I take issue with him, and he takes issue with me. But we have a nice, I think it's a nice relationship, where I say, Kevin, you're full of hot air, and he goes back and, well, you get what you vote for, and so on and so forth. Now that's the sort of debate that should be taking place, is what is right for our community. Now, in this particular instance, he is trying to defend, because I think that all the local politicians have been told to defend, is moving out of Southover House on Grange Road, Southover Road, and putting it in New Haven. There's nothing wrong with putting things in New Haven, but as some commentators already have said, is they don't need government down there. They need industry. They need people who work. They need people who will pay taxes, not collect them. They need a heart. And although they've got several millions of pounds now to regenerate the centre of the town, and I'm looking at it, it's all about, once again, is green policies. Oh, we can have this eco-friendly centre for people. What we need is to see the glory of New Haven restored. Take a look at some of the pictures of the 1930s and the 1940s. It's a delightful town, a lovely town. No wonder people would come from Dieppe to stay in New Haven, and as we go now to stay in Dieppe, because New Haven was a place where there was a wonderful hotel there. There were lots of lovely shops, and it was a lively place. The pubs were terrific. It needs rejuvenation now. And people say, oh, what are you talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is tried and tested. Go to Vilnius, which incidentally is under threat, because if the Russians invade Ukraine, there is nothing then to stop them invading the other border countries that used to be part of the old Soviet Empire. And Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, is one of them. But their old town has been regenerated, and it's a big, big old town, about 5 times the size of New Haven's old town, if you like, or town centre. But it's been wonderfully rejuvenated, and now it's just tourism alone carries it through. There's a sign there that proudly says that they've got something like 17 working churches of all religions within the walls. Now, you can say, New Haven isn't a walled city. Well, it is, because the planners who put up the roads have cut it off from everywhere. But why not make that a plus instead of a minus? Accept it as the boundaries, and within those boundaries, make this a town that you couldn't miss stopping in, that you don't want to go any further in when you get off the ferry. Those are the sort of things, initiatives I'd like to see. All right. Now, I'm expressing an opinion. It may well be that there are very good reasons why not, although I've talked to town planners about it. And they said, no, Keith, you're absolutely right. You've got to try and attract people into town centres. Even if they want to live in the country, you've got to try and attract them into town centres, not push them away. Yes, I'm on my high horse this morning. I really am. Let me tell you the things that I would like to go over this week. Well, first of all is the lack of governance. The fact that the governance of Lewis is, and therefore Lewis District, is moving away. The town is losing any vestige of self-control, self-government. And I hope that I can possibly get hold of Paul Miles tomorrow to come on and discuss this, because it is necessary to have a look back and see how our self-governance in Lewis has been eroded over the years to the point where we're now not going to have any. And that is very sad. Globalization. It is failing us. It has failed us with the banks. Can't see a manager anymore. It's failed us with the financial institutions such as credit card companies, where you deal, all you do is you get something into your inbox from a computer. Doesn't understand you as a customer at all. The NHS, right? You know, the expansion, globalization, if you like. Let's use the word globalization because it means enlargement. Much more under one roof. The system is not working any more than local governance is working, and that system is broken. And why our politicians, local politicians? Because they oversee the executive. The executive are implementers. And it seems to me that the present administration has completely destroyed any vestige of decent local government. Our treatment of the homeless is appalling. Our treatment of the mentally stressed is appalling. Our treatment of tenants is appalling. Look at housing policy. Oh, wow. There were 7 new houses came. You'd think that we just built 50,000 of them. No, we weren't 50,000. But you'd think that from the way that everybody threw their caps into the air. It's appalling. Shopping. High streets dying. In every town. Appalling. Energy. Because we went the way of the world without realizing that the world had planned rather better than we had for the introduction of sustainable energy through wind farms and other so-called renewable energy systems is fine as far as it went. But this whole business of using electricity for vehicles in Lewis is, I was checking again on the weekend. I think even if we are generous, there are going to be 10 points, 10 outlets to recharge your car or your vehicle. That getting rid of the present heaters in houses with the plan to reinstall with energy and pollution saving boilers. It's going to take 20 years. Inflation is now 4.5%. It could, according to the Bank of England, hit 7.25%. And the house prices are going to balloon, and then suddenly the balloon is going to pop. And a lot of people will be left holding houses that they can't afford, because the day of cheap mortgages, which we've stoked over the last 5 to 10 years, have gone. Tax rises. It's going to cost us more to live. And those sort of tax rises will then be reflected in people's demands for wages. So again, the cost of goods will go up. And what do? We concentrate on a birthday cake or a Christmas cake or some damn cake with icing in Westminster. I'm not saying that's unimportant. Morality in government is vital if we're to respect the leadership. The trouble is that all the people that are pointing and shouting at the kettle are as black a pan as the kettle. Dear, 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 dear. You want to point the finger? He who cast the first stone. Take a look at yourselves. The political classes have not only got us into a muck, they're in a muck themselves. Oh, but none of us ever want to think that we're part of something that is not quite right. I, in debate, defend the media, but I also am quite willing to admit that in many ways the media is letting us down. The media should be a watchdog. As I tell you, a little independent television station like Mirador is an anathema to local people. They don't want people prying. It's very interesting at council at a time how I've taught journalists in Eastern Europe, and I've taught them all the tricks of the trade. And to see the local council using them when they have council meetings and thinking that they're getting away with it is laughable. Talking about Flimflam, they have no idea at all. That's how naive they are about how to handle the media. Yeah, all you do is you go to the friendly one. Yeah. and then the rest. The trouble is, the rest has been diminished. That the rest has got to come back. That's why we at Mirador are hanging on, because we get no assistance whatsoever. In fact, we are appealing at the moment to the citizenry. In fact, we're appealing to the world to help us keep going, because nobody pays us anything. We don't get any subsidies. We got one small one, very small one throughout the lockdown. And boy, was it small compared to what everybody else was getting. And the fact of the matter is, one of our Russian friends has actually checked in. Would you believe that we have people abroad who watch us very carefully? Now, you know, also, the first people to donate funds to our crowdfunding campaign, which we are just getting going at the moment, one is from South Korea, and the other is from what was once called Macedonia. It's now, I think, it's the Republic of North Macedonia. No, they renamed it. But anyway, it is what was the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, and it is part of the Balkans. That's where our support is coming from. Why? Because they've lived under systems without a vital press, without a vital media, and they understand that if we lack support, that Britain is not going to be a place that is a very nice place to live in. And I know the good old liberal thinkers, okay, stop being so silly, stop waving your arms. Well, I've lived under these regimes, and if that's what we want, you can have it. I might have to go and live at the North Pole, because oppression is awful. We let in, I say we because we were part of the EU when it happened. We let in Romania, which continued with its corrupt ways, to where at one point I was a chair of a behind closed doors meeting of our ambassador and the ambassador of 6 other EU nations, major nations, who had to wave their finger and tell the Romanian government, if you are corrupt one more time in handing out contracts, we are going to recommend to our government that AU funds are cut off. And at that time, they were still throwing people into the jug who were journalists. And when corruption was caught, they changed the law to make sure that video bribery could not be shown on television. You want to go back to those things? By all means. If that's what you want, that's what you'll get. But the shrinkage of local media has been enormous. I'm not talking about the individual journalists, although I have some doubts about how well they're trained nowadays, and I'm vocal about that. But I am talking about the media themselves, which, because of this bloated economy that we've got, which is now about to come unstuck, have had to retrench. There's no real local media in Lewis District. So our politicians to get away with what they want. And they think with Flimflam on social media is good enough. I think the chickens are suddenly coming home to roost. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. Who knows? The point is, any attempts whatsoever to stifle debate about these things must be resisted. And we are one organisation that resists. And we're asking for your help. And if you don't get it, what you'll get is perhaps not what you wish for. Aesop, be careful what you wish for. You just might obtain it. I've rabbited on long enough this morning, haven't I? I've rabbited on. Let's calm down with just a little look at Susan's show, shall we? Let's leave it at that, except to say that the sun is shining, the sky is blue, we're going to have a slight breeze, we will get some cloud, but mostly we get sunshine, possibility of some rain around lunchtime, so do be careful, don't go out without a brolly if around about that time. Don't be fooled into thinking it's going to be nice all day. We had a bit of a miserable weekend, didn't we? Never mind. The weather always targets the weekend. But let me tell you about the headline in the Star, which says that on February the 14th, I just wish it was a leap year, because then I can be proposed to by all sorts of ladies. But on February the 14th, there's going to be a snowstorm that will actually cover the entire country. I just warn you. I've said enough. I've rabbited on, and I'm sure that what I do hope is that I have pissed you off enough to start to get excited enough to start debate. Because the moment you start talking, and locally we need to start talking about the move from south over, because it is outrageous and it is beginning to stir a few prickles, and it's beginning to people asking about the innards of governance locally, which we've been on about for a long time. And perhaps at long last there's a bit of awareness starting in the community. But also is, remember, who are the horde at the gates? They don't give a damn about iced cakes in lockdown or not in lockdown. Toodaloo.